The deck vibrated. Not the familiar, distant hum of the carrier's engines, but a deep, resonant groan, as if the ship itself was protesting. Major WIDOW Vance's breath fogged the acrylic of her helmet visor. Wipe. The salt spray misted it again instantly. Her world was reduced to 800 feet of wet, pitching steel, and the twin throttles heavy in her gloved hands. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon, loaded with 150 rounds of 30mm, made the A-10's nose sag, pulling it toward the black water. Her radio crackled, static, then a voice. The ship's air boss, his skepticism a razor's edge. "WIDOW 1-1 Tower, we are non-standard. The deck is yours. Godspeed." Non-standard, a polite word for impossible. She stared past the rain-slicked HUD. There was no catapult, no steam shuttle to throw her 30 tons of Warthog into the sky. There was only the engine's scream, the ocean, and the man on the deck, the shooter, who now held his hand aloft. He wasn't saluting, he was bracing for the fireball. Kira's fingers tightened. Her gaze locked onto the vanishing point where the sky met the sea. The shooter's hand dropped. 72 hours earlier, Fob Guardian Bagram Airfield. The aluminum ladder rungs were cold, even through her flight gloves. Major WIDOW Vance, call sign Widow, ran her bare fingers over the skin of the A-10, just aft of the cockpit. A pre-flight check her hands could do in darkness. The flush rivets were smooth. No cracks, no hydraulic weeping. Her crew chief, Staff Sergeant Diaz, held the flashlight, though the high desert sun at Fob Guardian was already bleaching the sky. "She's clean, Major," Diaz said. His voice was always too loud, too cheerful for 0500. "Loaded the new HEI mix you wanted." Kira just grunted, her gaze sweeping the pylon. Diaz saw a plane. Kira saw a system of potential failures. She saw the 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon that defined the aircraft, and the massive, unswept wings that made it a slow target for the fast-mover jets on the other side of the airfield. But most of all, she saw the titanium bathtub that encased the cockpit. She trusted the bathtub. It was a tangible, physical promise. The rules of engagement, the politics, the VTC briefings with condescending Navy captains, those were just vapor. The titanium was real. She moved to the landing gear. The tires were solid, the pins in place. Diaz, sensing her mood, lowered his voice. "You good, Major? You were quiet in the brief." Quiet. That was the word for her. She pulled the strap on her helmet, the heavy bag thumping her thigh. "I'm always quiet, Staff Sergeant." "Yeah, but this is quiet. She stopped her walk around and faced him. Diaz was young, but good. He saw too much. "The mission is standard CAS. The ODA paints the target, we hit the target. We refuel, we come home." This ODA, it's the same region as the last one. Diaz offered carefully. Kira's jaw tightened. The air, thin at this altitude, suddenly felt thick, tasting of JP-8 fuel and sand. The last one. The mission where the ROE had been too tight. The positive identification too slow. The mission where her titanium bathtub had protected her, but her hesitation had doomed them. She turned away from him, back to the machine. "Check the countermeasures. I want flares triple-checked." "Major." "Triple checked." Her voice was flat, final. It was the only armor she had outside the cockpit. Diaz winced, then nodded. "Wilco." He hustled toward the tail. Kira finished the walk around alone. She didn't climb the ladder. She ascended. The cockpit embraced her. This was not a cockpit. It was a crucible, stripped of everything non-essential. No high-gloss F-35 touchscreens, just analog gauges, a greasy HUD, and the heavy mechanical thunk of the canopy lock. She strapped in, the 5-point harness pressing the memory of the ODA back into the recesses of her mind. She began her switch check. Her movements were economical, precise. Battery, APU, fuel flow. This cockpit is her only true home. The only place the ghosts were muffled by the whine of the twin TF-34 engines spooling up. Diaz's voice crackled in her headset, distant, tinny. "Widow 1-1, checks are green. She's all yours." Kira's gloved hand rested on the twin throttles. She looked past the cannon's muzzle at the cratered gray line of the Bagram runway. She could smell the faint, acrid tang of cordite from last night's rocket attack. Her world was reduced to this: 18 tons of aircraft, a cannon, and a promise she made to herself. Never again. She keyed the mic. "Widow 1-1, ready to taxi?" The VTC room inside the Tactical Operations Center was a refrigerated box. Kira hated these rooms. They smelled of stale coffee and ozone, and the air was always too cold, too sterile. It was a stark contrast to the grit and JP-8 of the flight line. She sat at the long, polished table, her spine rigid, hands clasped loosely in her lap. Her flight suit felt out of place against the polished mahogany. On the main screen, a pixelated face resolved. Captain Morrison, the Carrier Air Group CAG commander for the Truman, broadcasting from the ship's CIC. His collar was starched, his expression impatient. "Let's be brief." Morrison's voice, tinny and compressed, filled the room. "The ODA is spinning up. They're infiltrating Zabul Province, high-value target. My F-35s are on station, ready to provide top cover and precision strike." He paused, his eyes scanning a document off-screen. "Ah, and Major Vance, you're the A-10 detachment lead?" Kira pressed her fingernail into the soft flesh of her thumb, a silent anchor. "Yes, Captain. Widow Squadron is green for the KAS mission." The CAG gave a thin, dismissive smile. "CAS, Major? This is a sensitive HVT. We need speed, stealth, and networked data. My Lizards, F-35s, can be in and out before the enemy even hears them. Your Warthogs, they're slow targets. Loud, not exactly subtle." He doesn't respect the mission. He respects the hardware. The insult was clear, aimed at her airframe, at the entire Air Force presence in what he considered a Navy theater. Kira's face remained neutral. She would not defend the Hog. The Hog didn't need defending. It needed tasking. "The A-10 provides a different capability, sir," she said, her voice even. "Our loiter time allows for persistent overwatch. If the ODA gets into a protracted engagement, which they won't if we strike fast enough." Morrison cut her off. "This isn't a 2003-era firefight, Major. This is surgical." Kira felt the gaze of her own operations officer, Jester, sitting beside her. Jester was vibrating with the need to argue. Kira kept her eyes locked on the screen, silent. She would not plead. She would not be emotional. A new window popped up on the VTC, a grainy night vision feed from a third location. The ODA team leader, his call sign, Stone. His face was obscured by shadow and helmet, only his microphone visible. CAG, Stone Actual. The voice was a low, gravelly whisper. "Appreciate the F-35s for ISR, but if we go comms black on infill, we're not surgical. We're bait. We need persistent eyes, and we need a gun we can trust danger close." Morrison's expression tightened. "Stone 1, my assets are fully capable to—" "Captain," Stone cut him off, a breach of protocol that made Kira's breath catch. "No disrespect, but your assets drop 500-pounders. I need 30 millimeter. I need the Hog. We want the Warthogs, specifically Widow Squadron. We've worked with them before. They know the ROE. The silence in the VTC room was absolute. Kira didn't move, didn't smile. She just watched Morrison's pixelated face. He had been bypassed, his authority quietly subverted not by a rival officer, but by the customer, the man on the ground. Morrison stared at the screen for a long moment. He was trapped. To deny the ODA's request would be to own their failure. Fine, he snapped, his professionalism cracking. The primary KS role is USAF. Major Vance, your slow target has the mission. Don't be late. CAG out. The screen went black. Jester let out a slow, sharp breath. Damn! Kira finally unclenched her hand. She stood, the chair scraping back. Jester, spin up the mission brief. Full squadron, now! As she walked out, the CAG's XO, a Navy commander who had been silent the whole time, caught her eye. He didn't look angry. He looked worried. He's not happy, Major, the commander said. The ODA is, Kira replied, and walked past him into the harsh, bright heat of the Bagram morning. The briefing room shutters were closed, plunging the space into a heavy, artificial night. The only light came from the projector, casting a pale blue glow across the faces of Kira's 3 pilots. Jester, Ram, and the FNG, Flinch. Kira stood by the illuminated map, a laser pointer in her hand. The red dot was a single, bloody pinprick on the screen. Objective, Area Zabel, she began, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. It was a practiced calm, a bulkhead she erected between her memory and the task at hand. The word Zabel tasted like ash. The last time, the lost ODA. That had also been Zabel. She forced her gaze to the data slides. Infill is 2100 Zulu. Stone 1 and his element will be on the ground, moving to this ridgeline. Target package is HVT Alpha. Our time on station is 2130 plus or minus 3. That's a tight window, Widow, Jester interjected, leaning forward. That's max range, minimum fuel. We'll be sucking fumes coming home. Which is why your fuel management will be perfect, Kira countered, not looking at him. We are the primary KS. We are also the only KS. The Navy fast movers are strictly top cover. They won't get low. We will. She clicked to the next slide. Rules of engagement. It was the slide that mattered. Listen up. This is the crux. Weather is clear, but illumination will be 0. This is a night operation, and the ODA is in the blind. No vehicle support. That means positive identification is our burden. She aimed the laser at the text. PID will be established only by ground laser designator. We are authorized to engage targets marked by Stone 1's sparkle. Period. Flinch, the new guy, shifted. What if the GLD fails, Major? Kira's hand paused over the map. She saw it, the green-black thermal feed from 2 years ago. The call. My laser is down. They're in the open. Engage, engage. And her own voice. I do not have PID. I cannot engage. She blinked, cleared her throat. The briefing room was suddenly cold. If the laser fails, Kira said, her voice dropping, we are blind and deaf. We become a very loud, very expensive scarecrow. We will not fire a single round without that sparkle. We will not risk fratricide. Is that clear? The silence from her pilots was answer enough. They knew the history. They knew her history. We go in heavy, she continued, forcing the momentum. Full gun, rockets, and mavericks. Jester, you're my 2. Ram and Flinch, you're the backup element, rotating to the tanker to keep us persistent. Questions? There were none. Good. Kira closed the briefing file. The projector shut down, plunging the room into near-total darkness. The mission was set. The ODA was already moving because she had said go. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, familiar and crushing. Wheels up at 20:45, get to your birds. Her pilots filed out a quiet, yes ma'am, in the dark. Kira remained for a moment, letting her eyes adjust. She saw the ghost of the Zabel map burned onto her retina. This meticulous, obsessive planning. It was her penance. It was her only defense against the past. She was halfway to the door when the first klaxon sounded. Not the mission spin-up alarm, a different one. The one that made blood freeze. The overhead speakers crackled to life, a digitized voice screaming, "Incoming! Incoming! Incoming! Ballistic missile threat! MOP level 4! Incoming!" The floor jumped before the sound hit, a deafening, rolling crump that shook the building to its foundations. The world dissolved. The first impact threw Kira against the corridor wall. Dust and pulverized concrete rained from the ceiling. The MOP Level 4 announcement was a terrifying, procedural nightmare, chemical attack. Her training screamed, shelter, mask. Her instinct screamed, Diaz, the plane. She chose instinct. Kira slammed the door open and sprinted onto the flight line. The air was a toxic soup of smoke, cordite, and burning fuel. A second missile shrieked overhead, impacting the fuel depot. The resulting fireball punched the air from her lungs, a wave of heat so intense it felt like a physical blow. "Widow!" Jester yelled from behind her. "The bunkers! The bunkers!" She ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on her A-10 parked on the exposed hardstand. She saw movement. Diaz. He wasn't running to shelter. He was running to the plane, trying to unchock it, as if he could get it moving by sheer will. "Diaz, get out of there!" Kira bellowed, but her voice was stolen by the whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of the C-RAM system firing, its 20mm cannons stitching the sky, desperately trying to intercept the next wave. It failed. A third rocket hit the main runway, not the edge, the center. A massive explosion erupted, sending a black plume thousands of feet into the air. Kira dived behind a K-wall, the shrapnel pinging off the concrete. She looked up, her breath catching. The runway. It was gone. A massive, smoking crater now sat where the asphalt had been. The runway is gone. The realization hit her with the force of a physical impact. They were trapped. Her A-10s were nothing but 30-ton paperweights. The mission, the ODA, her purpose. All of it was irrelevant. The only objective now was survival. "RPG! RPG!" The shout came from the perimeter guard tower, just before a green-white streak impacted its base. The tower crumpled. Ground forces. This wasn't just a rocket attack. It was a coordinated assault. Kira scrambled from behind the K-wall. Diaz was still at the plane, fumbling with the cockpit ladder. "Diaz!" she screamed, sprinting across the tarmac. "It's over! The runway is gone! We have to move!" He looked at her, his face pale under the grease stains, his eyes wide with a terrifying, useless loyalty. "I can get her started, Major! We can die!" Kira grabbed his vest, hauling him away from the A-10. "The runway is gone. It's a ground attack. To the bunkers." Her radio crackled to life, a cacophony of overlapping screams. "Taking fire at the east gate!" "MOP 4. MOP. Chapo 4. Jester, where are you? I'm hit." It was Flinch. The FNG. His voice was a thin, watery sound. Kira dragged Diaz toward the nearest concrete shelter. "Jester, Widow, report!" Jester's voice ragged with panic. "Widow, the runway. God, the runway. Ram's bird is hit. It's on fire. Flinch is down. We're ground pounded. What's the alternate, Major?" What's the alternate? Kira threw Diaz into the bunker entrance and looked back one last time. Her hog sat in the firelight, pristine, useless. Ram's A-10 was a burning wreck. The air was filled with the pop, pop, pop of small arms fire. She keyed her mic, her voice a cold, hard knot. Jester, this is Widow. There is no alternate. Fob Guardian is lost. Widow 1-1, declaring Mayday. Kira's voice was hoarse. She had managed to get her A-10 airborne, launching from a damaged, debris-strewn taxiway. Jester was on her wing, his aircraft riddled with shrapnel. Bagram was a pillar of smoke behind them. Truman LSO Widow 1-1, she broadcast on the emergency frequency. 2 A-10s, bingo fuel, requesting emergency divert and barricade. The reply was sharp, incredulous. USAF, I copy Mayday, but I do not copy barricade. You are A-10s. You are not configured for carrier landing. Wave off. Repeat, wave off. Divert to Kandahar. Truman Widow, Kandahar is not an option, Kira stated. Her fuel gauge was a death sentence. We are landing on your deck, or we are ejecting into your ocean. Your choice. A tense, furious silence followed. Then, WSS Widow 1-1. We are rigging the barricade. You will be landing non-standard. Get in the stack and wait for the deck to clear. And God help you, Major. She's airborne. The words came from the ruins of Bagram. Diaz. He had survived, his voice coming over the maintenance net. Get him, Major. Then static. Kira pushed the thought away. She and Jester circled, watching the massive carrier turn into the wind. The deck looked impossibly small, a gray stamp in an endless blue. Jester, Kira ordered, her voice pure ice. You're heavier. I'm going first. Watch my approach. Watch the barricade. You get one shot. Do not break. Let the net catch you. Widow, Jester's voice was shaking. Fly the plane, Jester. Widow, you're cleared for your approach. The LSO's voice was tight. I see you. Call the ball. Kira didn't have a ball to call. She was flying an 18-ton truck onto a postage stamp. She dropped her landing gear. The 3 green lights were a small comfort. LSO Widow, no ball, flying the center line, on approach. The meatball light system on the carrier was a blur to her. It wasn't calibrated for her airframe. The LSO's voice turned urgent. You're low, Major! Power! Power! Wave off! Wave off! The red lights flashed on the carrier's superstructure. An explicit final order to abort. She ignored it. Her eyes were locked on the center line and the raised nylon net of the barricade. Her fuel was gone. The ocean was waiting. Her entire life, her entire career had been about procedure, about the rules. And in this moment, she had to break all of them. Do not break. Let the net catch you. She cut the throttle. The A-10 slammed onto the deck. It was not a landing. It was a controlled crash. The impact was violent, a bone-jarring shock that shot up the unreinforced landing gear through the titanium bathtub and into her teeth. The LSO's voice was a scream. Widow! The plane careened, rubber burning, the nose gear struggling to hold the center line. Kira fought the rudder, keeping the nose aimed at the net. The A-10 hit the barricade at over 90 knots. The sound was a violent, tearing screech of metal and nylon. The barricade straps snapped taut, throwing Kira forward, her harness locking so hard it drove the air from her lungs. The aircraft, designed to withstand ground fire, groaned in protest as its wings were caught by the thick webbing. Then, silence. A profound, ringing silence, broken only by the hiss of her own breathing and the distant scream of Jester's engines. She was alive. She was on the carrier. Kira looked up. Her A-10 was a wreck, Its nose gear collapsed, its wings tangled in the net. The deck was fouled, and standing just yards away, his helmet visor up, his face a mask of pure incandescent fury, was the CAG. Captain Morrison. "Major!" Morrison's voice boomed over the deck speakers, bypassing the radio. "You have just destroyed my flight deck." The distinguished visitor stateroom was a windowless, gray steel box. It was a prison cell, and Kira knew it. She had been escorted here by a stern-faced master-at-arms, her flight gear confiscated. She was a guest of the Navy, a term that tasted like ash. For 12 hours, she had seen no one. She was on jag hold, a legal black hole. She was not allowed to speak to Jester, who had also, miraculously, landed his A-10 before the deck was permanently closed, or anyone from her squadron. She was an outsider, a blue falcon, in the crude parlance of the enlisted men she'd heard whispering as she was led below decks. The smell was wrong. Her world was dust, JP8, and cordite. This world was industrial soap, salt, ozone, and the faint, pervasive odor of cooking oil from the mess. She sat on the edge of the rack, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. The guilt was a physical weight. Diaz. He had been on the radio, then static. He was gone. The FOB was gone. Her squadron was shattered. She had saved her own aircraft, her own life, and nothing else. The titanium bathtub had worked, and she hated it for that. A sharp rap on the steel door. "Major Vance, the captain will see you." The master-at-arms led her through the carrier's maze. She walked the 03 level, the cavernous hangar deck. It was a city of gray steel, filled with FA-18s and F-35s, all folded, chained, and immaculate. Her A-10s, or what was left of them, were nowhere to be seen, likely hidden away like a dirty secret. The Navy sailors, the skittles in their colored jerseys, stopped their work to stare. The greens, maintainers. The purples, fuelers. They saw her USAF flight suit, the wrong color, the wrong tribe. They saw the woman who had fouled the deck, who had broken their sacred, dangerous ballet. Their judgment was silent, heavy, and absolute. Kira kept her eyes forward, her face a neutral mask. Let them look. They didn't take her to the Admiral's bridge. They took her to the CAG's import cabin, a small, functional office. Captain Morrison was waiting, standing behind his desk. His fury from the deck had cooled into a brittle, professional ice. "Major," he said, not offering her a seat. "You have, in no uncertain terms, destroyed one A-10, crippled another, and put my flight deck out of commission for an estimated 48 hours. You have violated a direct order to wave off. Do you have anything to say?" Kira stood at attention. "I had bingo fuel, Captain. My wingman was in the same state. It was the deck or the ocean." "That will be for the inquiry to decide," Morrison said, his voice sharp. "You are, for all intents and purposes, a prisoner on my ship, Major. Your career is likely over." Kira didn't flinch. "Understood, sir." Morrison looked at her, a flicker of genuine confusion in his eyes. He clearly expected panic, or pleading. He got neither. "What kind of pilot are you, Vance?" "One who is alive, sir." A muscle in his jaw twitched. He hated her. Hated her airframe, hated her service, and hated, most of all, that she wasn't broken. "The jag hold is in effect," he continued. "You will not communicate with your wingman." He picked up a tablet. "I have 2 pieces of intelligence for you. First, in the chaos, a C-17 managed to get off the ramp at Bagram with evacuees. Your crew chief, Staff Sergeant Diaz, he's on this ship. He'll be confined to the maintenance bays." Kira's blood ran cold, then hot. Diaz. Alive. The bulkhead of her guilt cracked. She felt a sudden, dizzying wave of relief that almost buckled her knees, but she locked them. She would not give Morrison the satisfaction. "Second," the CAG said, his tone shifting to business. "The ODA you were supposed to support. Stone 1, they are in the blind. They missed their exfil window after Bagram fell. The HVT is on the move, and they are in deep pursuit with no support. The clock major is ticking." He tossed the tablet onto his desk. "Your stunt is the least of my problems. The ODA is pinned." The Combat Information Center was a cavern of blue-black light. Kira stood in the back, a ghost in a green flight suit, hands clasped behind her. She was an observer, a consultant, a prisoner. The CAG, Morrison, was in the command chair, his focus absolute. "Give me the feed from Stingray 1, Morrison ordered. A massive screen lit up with a green-tinted, high-altitude video feed. It was a soda straw view, looking almost straight down into a tight, rocky valley. Kira's blood went cold. She knew this geography. This was Zabul. Not just the same province, the same region, the same unforgiving terrain that had swallowed the last team. "Stone 1, this is Stingray 1-1. A new voice, a Navy pilot, came over the speakers, calm and professional. "I'm overhead, 20,000 feet, Angels 20. I have eyes on multiple heat signatures. What do you have for me?" The reply was a burst of static, then the strained, whispered voice of the ODA leader. "Stingray, Stone 1. We are taking contact. Heavy. They're in the rocks, east of our pose. Crack. Can't get a laser on them." "Stone 1, your comms are breaking," the Navy pilot said. "I need PID. I can't drop a GBU on a maybe." Kira watched the green-black feed. The FA-18 was circling, fast and high. The heat signatures were just indistinct white blobs clustered near another set of blobs, the ODA. "They're too close," Kira whispered to herself. The words were a prayer. A curse. "Stingray," the ODA leader's voice, desperate now. "They're massing. It's a danger-close situation. I need gun. Do you have gun?" "Negative, Stone 1, the pilot replied, and Kira could hear his frustration. "My gun is 20 mil low ammo. I'm loaded for strike, not CAS. I need a coordinate for a JDAM. I can't get low enough for a visual, too much ALTA." Kira's hand closed into a fist. He can't. The Super Hornet was a scalpel, but the ODA needed a sledgehammer. No, they needed a sewing needle, a 30mm sewing needle that could stitch a line between friend and foe from 500 feet. He's describing the target she failed to save years ago. The same scenario, the same impossible ROE, the same valley. Her blood turned to ice water. She could hear the screams from the last mission, the radio calls she had denied because she did not have PID. "Stingray, they're static. In the open. They're flanking us." "Stone 1, I do not have eyes on," the Navy pilot roared, his professional calm shattering. "I am not dropping a 500-pounder on your head. Give me a target." Kira watched the green blobs merge. It was happening again. She was watching a massacre, live, from a box of blue light, a prisoner of the man who could stop it. She stepped forward. The master-at-arms at the door tensed, but didn't stop her. She walked until she stood just behind the CAG's chair. "He can't," Kira said, her voice quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. Morrison spun in his chair, his face a mask of fury. "Major, you will—" "He can't do it, Captain," Kira repeated, her eyes locked on the screen. "He's too fast. He's too high, and his ordnance is wrong. He'll kill them all." "And what do you suggest?" Morrison sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Kira's gaze shifted from the screen to his eyes. Her heart was a cold, heavy stone in her chest. This was it. The moment she staked her life, what was left of her career, on the one truth she owned. "The Super Hornet can't do this," she said. "But I can." "With what, Major?" The Kaji's voice was a low, dangerous snarl. "Your planes are scrap. You are grounded." "Jester's bird is not scrap," a new voice said. Staff Sergeant Diaz stood in the CIC hatchway, flanked by the Master-at-Arms, who had, apparently, failed to stop him. He was covered in grease, his knuckles bloody. "The gear held. The engines are solid. She's fixable. I've seen worse." Morrison turned his fury on Diaz. "Staff Sergeant, you are out of line. You will be—" "Captain?" Kira cut him off, stepping forward, placing herself between Diaz and the Kaji. "He's here because I called him. Bring us to the captain. Now, both of us." Her audacity sucked the air from the room. Morrison's eyes narrowed to slits. He saw something in her face. Not defiance, not panic. He saw certainty. He lifted a phone. "Bridge, get the captain." The captain's in-port cabin was small, sterile, and paneled with a cheap wood veneer meant to simulate authority. The ship's CO, a man with graying temples, stood with his arms crossed, his face a mask of exhausted patience. Morrison was there, vibrating with contained rage. "Major," the captain said, his voice calmer than Morrison's, but just as final. "The CAG informs me you have a proposal. Before you speak, know that I have already reviewed the preliminary report. You are facing court-martial." "I know, sir," Kira said, "and I'll face it. But first, you need to let me launch Jester's A-10. The silence in the cabin was total, broken only by the gentle hum of the ship. The captain stared at her. He didn't laugh. He didn't yell. He just looked at her as if she were a new, fascinating species of insect. "Explain," the captain said simply. Morrison exploded. "Sir, this is insane. The A-10 has no catapult fittings. It has no tailhook. Its thrust-to-weight ratio is abysmal. She'd need 3 times our deck length to even dream of getting airborne. She is asking to die. Worse, she is asking to destroy my flight deck and kill my crew in a fireball." "I'm not," Kira said, her voice cutting through his tirade. She looked past the CAG, directly at the captain. "Your fast movers are designed for catapult launch. They're built for speed, not lift. The Hog is different. She has massive, unswept wings. She was designed to take off from damaged, short-field runways in Germany." "This is not Germany, Major. This is the sea," the captain said. "It's not about the plane, sir," Diaz interjected, his voice passionate. "It's about the weight. We strip her. We strip her clean." Kira nodded, taking over. "No pylons, no external stores, no armor plating we can spare. We empty the chaff and flare pods. We take every non-essential bolt out of her. We load the GAU-8 with just 500 rounds, not 100. We put in just enough fuel for a one-way trip to that valley and back to Kandahar. No reserve." She was a pilot, but she was also an engineer. The numbers were spinning in her head, clean and perfect. "She's calculating," Kira said, her voice gaining momentum. She was no longer pleading, she was teaching. "Turn this ship 30 degrees into the wind. Give me 30 knots of wind over deck. With the incline of the bow ramp, I don't need a catapult. I have just enough runway." She saw the doubt in their faces. They saw a desperate woman. They don't see the math. She wasn't guessing. She ran the numbers while she was locked in her room. She knows the Hog. It's a suicide mission, Morrison stated, his voice flat. No, Kira said, locking her eyes on his. It's a calculation. She took a breath. It's not a launch, Captain. It's a jump, and I will make it. The captain held her gaze for a long, agonizing moment. He was weighing the ODA, the ship, the laws of physics, and the career of this unblinking woman in front of him. He looked at Morrison. Captain, your objection is noted. He turned back to Kira. Absolutely not. The risk is unacceptable. It's a suicide mission, and you will foul my deck. Get her out of my sight. Major Vance, you are confined to quarters. The master-at-arms locked the deadbolt on her cabin. The sound was a heavy, metallic clack of finality. Kira was a prisoner again. The room was a 6-by-8-foot steel box, the air tasting of recycled breath and metal polish. She did not pace. She did not panic. She sat on the thin mattress, closed her eyes, and began to fly. In her mind, she was in the hangar bay with Diaz. She visualized Jester's A-10. Weight. It is all about weight. She began to tear it down, bolt by bolt in her imagination. Pylons off. All 6. That was 2,000 pounds. Chaff, flare pods, empty. Another 200. The GAU-8, Diaz said 500 rounds. That's, she did the math. 600 pounds versus the 1,200 for a full load. Good. Armor. Can he pull the non-essential cockpit plates? No, the bathtub was integral, but the engine cowlings. Her solitude was a different kind of cockpit, one of pure, focused calculation. She was not a pilot. She was a single point of will, directing her hands, Diaz, and Jester from afar. The guilt was a cold stone in her gut. She was asking them to burn their careers for her, for a theory, for a jump. She was accepting their sacrifice, and that, she knew, was a commander's darkest burden. She was running the numbers on the windover deck for the 20th time when a quiet tap, tap, tap came from the door's ventilation grill. Kira was on her feet instantly. She pressed her ear to the cold steel. Major? Jester's voice, a strained whisper. Major, it's me. Jester, what are you doing? The jag hold. Screw the jag hold. Diaz he's a maniac, Kira. A small, battered military radio was pushed through the grill. Kira grabbed it. It was one of their own USAF ground crew radios, not part of the ship's network. A bubble of conspiracy in the Navy's ocean. She keyed the mic. Diaz, report! Diaz's voice crackled through, low and hurried, the sounds of clanging tools behind him. Widow, you read me? I've got Jester here, we're working. The Navy, they're not happy. The Greens, Navy maintainers, think we're desecrating a corpse. Status, Diaz, not politics. Right. She's stripped. Pylons, stores, half the avionics you don't need. She's a race car, just like you said. But there's a problem. Kira's heart tightened. What problem? The logs, Major. I can't hide this much maintenance. The ship's system is all networked. They'll see her going green, flyable, and the CAG will have us in irons. Kira's eyes closed. It was over. A procedural wall, as fatal as the ocean. Stand down, Diaz. No, Major, wait, listen. Diaz's voice was suddenly sharp, proud. I fixed it. I plugged in our USAF diagnostic kit, bypassed their system. As far as the Truman's computers are concerned, Jester's hog is a red X. She's grounded, non-mission capable, a piece of junk waiting for the scrap heap. But our system. She's green, Major. She's flyable. Kira understood. Hadn't just fixed the plane. He had committed a federal crime. Hacking a multi-billion-dollar ship's network. The irreversible turning point. Diaz! She's ready, Major, he said simply, his trust absolute. "Widow!" Jester cut in, his voice returning to the door grill. "He did it. It's ready. But Kira, the other problem. The CAG. He posted Marines at the hangar bay elevator. 2 of them. There's no way to get you to the deck." "Jester." Kira's voice was a low growl into the smuggled radio. "The Marines. Can you get past them?" "Negative, Widow. They're locked in." "Don't. I'm not going to the hangar. I'm going to the CIC. Get me the ODA's frequency. Patch it through to my radio. Then patch my mic to the CIC main speakers. Can you do it?" A pause. Jester understood. It was an information warfare coup. Kira, Can you do it?" "Yes, I can. Diaz's kit can access the ship's PA." "Do it, now." Kira stood. She walked to the steel door and pounded on it with the heel of her hand. "Master at arms. Prisoner request." The bolt slid back. The burly guard looked annoyed. "What now, Major?" "I need to speak to the CAG. It's an operational emergency." "The CAG is in an operational emergency, ma'am. He's in the CIC, and you're not." "Then you can explain to him, after the ODA is wiped out, why you refused to pass on time-sensitive intelligence." The guard hesitated. The word intelligence was a key. The word wiped out was a threat. He grunted. "Fine, but you're not walking. You're cuffed." Kira held out her wrists. She was marched through the gray corridors, this time in binders. It was the ultimate humiliation and the ultimate camouflage. She was no longer a rogue officer. She was a piece of cargo being delivered. They entered the CIC. The atmosphere was a funeral. All eyes were on the main screen, where the Stingray pilot was still circling, his voice now strained. "Stone 1, I'm at bingo fuel. I have to RTB. I still have no PID. Captain Morrison." Kira's voice cut the air. The CAG spun, his face demonic. "Master at arms! Get her out of here! I gave a direct order!" "Captain!" Kira shouted, pulling against the guard. "The ODA is still alive." "We don't know that. Their beacon is dead." "Their beacon is, but their radio isn't." "They're on a hot mic," Kira said, holding up her smuggled radio, which was still cuffed to her. "Jester, now." She keyed the mic. At first, there was only static. Then, the entire CIC was filled with a sound more terrifying than any explosion. It was the sound of a man's breathing, a ragged, wet, desperate gasping. "Hunk! Hunk!" Then a whisper. 3. Left. 3. They're static. In the rocks. God. A burst of gunfire. Muffled. Then a scream. A short, cut-off shriek. "Hink! Hink! They're flanking! Flanking!" It was Stone 1's voice, raw and broken. "Break! Break! Hold the Yamaso line!" The CIC operators froze. The Navy officers stared, their faces pale. This was not a green blob on a screen. This was a man dying. Morrison was white-knuckling the arm of his chair. He looked physically ill. Kira stepped forward, the guard moving with her. She looked at the CAG. Her voice was not pleading. It was a cold, hard blade. "That's your ODA, Captain. That's your mission. You can ground me. You can put me in irons, but you can't ground the truth." She watched his face. Not for anger, for the flicker of doubt. The moment the man overtakes the rank. He's afraid, not of me. He's afraid of being the one who said no when yes was the only answer. "They need the Warthog," Kira said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You need me." Morrison's gaze was locked on the speaker, listening to the click-click of an empty weapon. He looked away from her, toward the air boss. His voice was a rasp. Move the F-35s. Clear the deck. He turned to the master-at-arms. Uncuff her. He looked at Kira, his eyes dead. Get her to her plane. If she can get to it. This is not on my authority. He hadn't said yes. He had removed the obstacles. The master-at-arms, his face unreadable, unlocked her cuffs. The hatch to the flight deck opened onto chaos. The relative quiet of the CIC was replaced by a deafening physical roar. It was the sound of 30-knot winds screaming over the deck, mixed with the high-pitched whine of the F-35s being re-spotted to clear the landing strip. The air was cold, wet, and tasted of salt and diesel. The Navy's JP-5, not her familiar JP-8. Kira stepped onto the non-skid surface. She had no flight helmet, no vest. A yellow shirt. A plane director saw her, his face a mask of disbelief, and pointed angrily toward the island's ready room. She was disrupting the flow. She ignored him and walked to the edge of the deck, where Jester was waiting, holding her gear. He'd salvaged it from the wreck of her own hog. He didn't speak. His eyes were wide, terrified for her. He just held up her vest, and she stepped into it, the familiar weight a cold comfort. He handed her the helmet. Kira, he started, his voice cracking. Stay here, Jester. Watch the feed. Get the ODA's status, she ordered, her voice flat. She was already disconnecting from him, from everything but the machine waiting for her. She turned and began the walk. It was the longest walk of her life. The deck was a sacred place, a ballet of precise, dangerous movements. Her presence, USAF, female, a rogue element, was a sacrilege. Everyone stopped. The grapes, refuelers, paused, their purple-topped helmets turning in unison. The greens, maintainers by the F-35s, ceased their work. They stood as one, a silent, hostile audience. Every step on the non-skid deck felt like walking in wet cement. The stairs were physical blows. They're waiting for me to fail. They think I'm arrogant. They think I'm insane. She felt the primal, animal terror of the act settle in. This was not a calculation. This was a physical thing. The deck was too short. The wind was a howl, not a guarantee. The plane was a patched-up beast. Keep walking. She locked her eyes on the A-10. It was parked at the very edge of the stern, angled for the longest possible run-up. It looked alien, stripped of its pylons and stores. It looked naked, wounded. Diaz was waiting for her, standing by the ladder. He was not in uniform. He was in a grease-stained t-shirt, his face pale, his hands shaking. But his eyes were pure, uncut loyalty. He was the one man on this ship who wasn't staring at her, but was with her. He held up her helmet, which she'd left with Jester. No, this was Jester's helmet. Her radio was probably busted. Diaz, she said, her voice lost in the wind. He leaned in, shouting over the roar. Stripped her clean, Major. She's a race car now. The math is good. I checked the wind. The math is good. She took the helmet, her hands numb. He gripped her arm, his fingers digging in, a last, desperate human contact. Just don't ditch, Major, please. Kira looked at him, at this man who had sacrificed his entire career for her calculation. She nodded. That was all. She pulled the helmet on, sealing herself inside. She climbed the ladder. The metal was cold. She dropped into the titanium bathtub, her sanctuary. She strapped in, the 5-point harness feeling like a desperate embrace. The cockpit was silent, save for the rush of her own breathing in the mask. She flicked the APU switch. The engines began to whine. Her radio crackled. It was the CAG, his voice in her helmet, a cold, dead sound. Major Vance, the ship is turning into the wind. The deck is yours. You have one chance. Inside the cockpit, the world was her breath and the green glow of the instruments. Kira's hands moved over the console, a practiced, precise ballet. She was calm. She was in the titanium bathtub. She was home. The roar of the wind, the fury of the CAG, the stares of the deck crew, all of it was outside. Here, there was only the math. She powered up the systems. The A-10, stripped of its complex avionics, felt light, responsive. She spooled the engines, the familiar high-pitched whine building to a solid, stable roar. The deck vibrated beneath her. Her radio crackled. The ship's air boss. WIDOW 1-1 tower. Wind over deck is standby. A pause. Kira's hand froze on the throttle. WIDOW, wind is steady. Baron 030. Speed is 27 knots. Kira's blood stopped. She did not move. She did not breathe. 27. Her plan, her life was built on a minimum of 30. 30 knots was the bare, razor-thin edge of possibility. 30 knots was the number that made the jump theoretically survivable. 27 was not a risk. It was a statistical impossibility. 3 knots. Kaita's entire plan, her career, the ODA, lost for 3 knots of wind. The ship was already pushing its max speed, turned perfectly into the gale. There was no more. The ocean would not provide. The blood drained from her face, leaving her skin cold and clammy under the mask. My math was wrong. She hadn't failed because of procedure, or a hostile CAG, or a lack of courage. She had failed because she had miscalculated the physics, the one thing she trusted, the one thing that defined her. I failed them again. The ghosts of Zabel, the ones she had held at bay, flooded the cockpit. They were here sitting on her lap, their hands on the controls. You were too slow then. You are too slow now. She was a fraud. A pilot who had convinced a loyal crew to commit career suicide, all for a sum that didn't add up. The CAG's voice broke the spell, but it sounded distant, as if from another world. WIDOW? Do you copy? The deck is yours. She couldn't answer. She was paralyzed. It was over. All she had to do was shut down the engines, accept the humiliation, accept the end. Live with the fact that she had listened to a man die, again, and done nothing. Then, the second hammer fell. The patched-through frequency in her left ear, the one with the ODA's hot mic feed, went silent. The gasping, the gunfire, the screaming, it all just stopped, replaced by a flat, empty hiss. Stone 1? Kira whispered, her thumb fumbling on the mic. Stone 1, this is WIDOW. Talk to me. The static hissed. Then, one last broken transmission. The voice was unrecognizable, just a wet, dying rattle. WIDOW, ksht, there, it's over for us. Get static. The radio died. Not a hot mic, not a desperate plea, just the final, absolute silence of a non-responsive team. They were gone. Kira Vance stared at the rain-slicked deck. Her plan was impossible. Her mission was irrelevant. The men she was trying to save were dead. She had failed, utterly. The CAG's voice returned, now quiet, almost gentle, the sound of a man released from a terrible burden. WIDOW, the ODA is non-responsive. The mission is scrubbed. Stand down, Major. Shut down your engines. She closed her eyes. The order was a relief, a release. It was over. Shut down your engines. The order was a mercy. Kira's hand, heavy as stone, moved toward the engine cutoff levers. Her fingers, numb and clumsy, grazed the cold, yellow-topped handles. It was done. She had failed. She had lost. She would live, and they were dead. A clean, simple, devastating transaction. On the deck, she could see the shooter, the launch officer, who had been standing in grim anticipation. He relaxed, his shoulders slumping. He turned his back to her, a gesture of finality, and began walking toward the island. It was over. Kira's eyes were fixed on the rain-slicked deck, but she wasn't seeing it. She was seeing the Zabel Valley, the green-black feed, the heat signatures being extinguished one by one. She had done nothing then. She had done nothing now. The titanium bathtub was a coffin. Her hand closed around the levers, pull, and then click, click, click. The sound was tiny, sharp, and clear in her left ear, cutting through the engine whine and the hiss of static. It wasn't radio noise. It was mechanical. It was the sound of a rifle bolt striking an empty chamber. Click, click, click. Kira's hand froze. It was not a sound of defeat. It was not a sound of surrender. It was the sound of a man who was out of ammunition, out of time, and out of hope, and was still pulling the trigger. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated defiance. Click, click, click. A sound that said, "I am here. I am alive. And I will not quit." He didn't quit. Her hand, which had been a dead thing, a traitor, came alive. The fingers that were meant to pull the engine cutoff splayed wide, moving away from the yellow handles. He didn't quit. Her gaze snapped up, from the instruments to the vanishing point of the deck. The mission was gone. The ODA was gone. The math was wrong. The CAG had scrubbed it. None of it mattered. He was alive. He was fighting. Neither will I. She was no longer a major. She was no longer USAF. She was no longer a failure. She was a single, pure extension of that click, click, click. It was the sound of her own soul. She flipped her radio frequency, not to the air boss, but to the bridge, to the CAG. Her voice was not a plea. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact, a new rule of physics. CAG, I'm going. She didn't wait for a reply. She didn't care if he screamed or threatened or court-martialed her. He was irrelevant. The 3 knots were irrelevant. She flipped back to the deck frequency. The shooter was almost to the island, his back still to her. "Shooter!" she roared, her voice a raw, primal command. "Get back to the line! Now!" She shoved the throttles forward, not to the stops, but to 80%. The A-10 shuddered, a beast waking up. She stomped on the brakes, holding the plane against its own power. "Shooter! Now!" The man stopped. He turned, his face a cartoon of disbelief in the rain. He saw the full-throated engine exhaust. He saw the plane straining at its brakes. He wasn't a shooter. He was just a man watching a ghost. Kira keyed the mic one last time, her voice a razor. "I am taking this deck. Get clear or get on board." The deck vibrated. Not the familiar, distant hum of the carrier's engines, but a deep, resonant groan from her own aircraft. The A-10 was straining against its brakes, its twin engines screaming at 80% power, fighting her. Kira's world was reduced to 800 feet of wet, pitching steel and the twin throttles heavy in her gloved hands. She saw the shooter. He had turned. He was running back, his face a white mask of terror and disbelief. He wasn't directing her. He was a witness. He fumbled into position, his gestures no longer crisp, but frantic. He was bracing for the fireball. Her radio crackled, static, then a voice, the ship's air boss, his voice no longer commanding, but awestruck. "WIDOW 1-1 Tower, we are non-standard. The deck is yours. Godspeed." Non-standard, a polite word for impossible. The word for a pilot who had gone rogue, who was committing suicide, and who was taking a $30 million asset with her. She stared past the rain-slicked HUD. There was no catapult, no steam shuttle. There was only the engine's scream, the ocean, and the 27 knots of wind that were not enough. She looked at the shooter. His hand was aloft, shaking in the wind. He wasn't saluting. He wasn't signaling. He was bracing. His hand dropped, a gesture of surrender. "It's in your hands. Now." Kira's fingers tightened. Her gaze locked onto the vanishing point where the gray sea met the gray sky. She released the brakes, and she shoved the throttles forward. She pushed them past the 100% detent, past the red line, into the firewall. An act that would torch the engines, that would shred them. An override that maintainers warned would turn the turbines into shrapnel. She didn't care. She needed everything. The A-10 jumped. It was not an acceleration. It was a lurch, a raw, unbraked explosion of thrust. The stripped-down Warthog, light as a race car, shot forward, slamming Kira back into her seat. The G-force was instant. The noise was a physical thing, a solid wall of sound that shook her teeth. The deck rushed at her. Lift, lift, lift. The markers on the side of the runway were a blur, a solid, streaking line. Too fast, too slow. The nose was heavy. The GAU-8 cannon pulling it down, the click, click, click in her ear urging it on. She wasn't flying. She was a bullet. She saw the end of the deck. It was not a runway, it was a cliff, 100 feet to go. The plane was too heavy. The 27 knots were not enough. The math was right. It's impossible. Pull. She hauled back on the stick, not with the finesse of a pilot, but with the raw, desperate strength of a survivor. She pulled the stick into her lap. The A-10's nose pitched up, a desperate, clumsy gesture. The main landing gear left the deck. The plane dropped. It fell. The ocean filled her windscreen. A vast, gray, swallowing void. The deck of the carrier was above her. This was it. The moment of impact. The cold water. The end. Brrrah! The engines, pushed beyond every safety limit, caught. The overstressed turbines screamed in protest, but delivered one final impossible burst of power. The plane shuddered. The wings bit the dense, salt-heavy air. The A-10 stopped falling. It clawed. It hung suspended, its nose pointed at the sky, its engines a howl of pure, unadulterated rage. Then, agonizingly, it climbed. 1 foot, 10 feet. She was airborne. She was flying. She cleared the bow of the carrier by inches. Kira's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the stick. Her mask was filled with the smell of her own sweat and the acrid metallic tang of ozone and terror. She keyed the mic. Her voice was not her own. It was a raw, shredded sound. "WIDOW 1-1 is airborne, en route to objective." She paused and keyed the mic again, this time on the ODA's frequency. "Contact." Click, click, click. The A-10 was a wounded animal, its engines screaming in protest from the firewall abuse. Kira didn't care. She was flying. She was airborne. She had beaten physics. The Zabul Valley was a black, jagged scar on her HUD. She was Winchester, out of missiles, out of bombs. Everything had been stripped by Diaz. Everything except the heart of the hog. The GAU-8 cannon and the 500 rounds of 30mm high-explosive incendiary she had demanded. It was a one-way trip. Her fuel gauge was already a death sentence. She had just enough to get to the valley and make a single pass, then limp toward Kandahar. "Stone 1, Widow. Talk to me. Where are you?" The radio hissed. Then a voice. So faint, so broken, it was hardly a voice at all. "Widow, God, Widow, we are on the ridge, the East Ridge, they're all around us." Click, click, click. "I hear you, Stone," Kira said, her voice a calm, cold instrument. "I'm inbound, 1 minute. I am guns only. I need you to go dark. I will fire on the east ridge 20 meters north of your last known. Widow, we are on that ridge. You'll hit us. Negative, Stone. I'm firing north of you, on the ingress path. Get your head down. She rolled the A-10 onto its side, the ground rushing up to meet her. She descended, not like a plane, but like a hawk, dropping from the safety of altitude into the valley's killing floor. Small arms fire pinged off the titanium bathtub, a familiar, useless rain. She saw them. 3 heat signatures, huddled back to back behind a sliver of rock, and all around them, a dozen, no 20 more massing for the final rush. This was danger close. This was suicide. This was the job. She was at 500 feet, the terrain a blur. She lined up the pipper on her HUD, placing it on the rocks just north of the 3 men. Stone, guns, now. Her thumb depressed the trigger. The world dissolved in the brrrr-ty. It was not a sound. It was a physical, tectonic event. The entire airframe shuddered violently as the 7-barrel cannon unleashed hell at 4,200 rounds per minute. The stream of 30-millimeter shells, each the size of a milk bottle, struck the ridgeline not as bullets, but as a continuous, explosive line. The ground erupted. Rock, earth, and enemy fighters were vaporized, a literal red line drawn in the dirt. The metallic, acidic taste of gun gas filled the cockpit. She held the trigger for 2 seconds, a lifetime. She released and hauled the stick back, climbing, the A-10 groaning under the G-load. She looked back. The ridge was on fire. The massing force was gone. The 3 heat signatures were still there, unmoving, but there. Stone 1, Widow. Ridge is clear. Bug out. I am RTB. She pointed the nose toward Kandahar, her fuel warning screaming. She had nothing left. She landed at Kandahar airfield with her engines quitting on the taxiway. She sat in the cockpit, the engines spooling down into a profound, echoing silence. She was alive. They were alive. She waited. The flashing blue lights of the Humvee were not a rescue. They were an arrest. The Air Force Security Police pulled up, and a stern-faced colonel she had never seen before approached the ladder. She shut down the battery. The cockpit went dark. She felt calm, no fear, no regret, just quiet. Weeks later, a gray, windowless office in Washington, D.C. The air was the same recycled metallic taste as her cell on the Truman. She was in her service dress uniform, but the insignia had been stripped. No wings, no rank. The colonel at the desk didn't look up. Major Vance, your actions were found to be in violation of Articles 90, 92, and 108 of the UCMJ, insubordination, dereliction, and destruction of military property. Kira sat at attention. She said nothing. However, the colonel continued, shuffling papers. Given the extraordinary nature of the mission and the successful extraction of ODA Stone 1, the Joint Chiefs have opted for a quiet resolution. He pushed a file across the desk. You will be processed out. Honorable discharge for the convenience of the government. You will sign this non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak of the Truman. You will never speak of Zabul. Your flight career is over. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Kira said. Her voice was flat. She signed the papers. A career, 2 decades of her life, ended with a flick of a pen. An aide handed her a single, standard manila envelope. Your personal effects, ma'am. She stood, rendered her final salute, which was not returned, and walked out. She didn't open the envelope until she was in the civilian-filled anonymity of the Dulles airport. She sat, a ghost in an undecorated uniform, waiting for a flight to a life she didn't understand. She opened it. Inside there was no letter, no orders, no explanation, just an ODA team patch, the kind they wear on their sleeve in country, a skull with a spade. On the back, written in thick black marker, were 3 words: Widow, thanks. Stone. Kira closed her hand around the small embroidered patch. The fabric was stiff, the edges sharp. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, the ghosts were silent. She did not wait for the flight. The noise of the terminal, the announcements for vacation destinations, the laughter of families, the casual complaints about delays, was a language she no longer understood. She was an alien, a ghost in a useless uniform. She walked out of the terminal, past the taxis and the hurried goodbyes, and found a bus heading west. The destination did not matter. Only the motion. 6 months later, the sun of the high desert baked the aluminum skin of the hangar. The air didn't smell of salt or JP-8. It smelled of dust, old oil, and hot metal. Kira Vance wore a grease-stained canvas shirt, her hair tied back. Her hands, calloused and stained, were deep in the guts of a radial engine from a World War II-era T-6 Texan. Her new bathtub was a 1940s-era airframe, its physics just as demanding, its tolerances just as precise. Her discharge papers were filed away in a box. Her name, Kira Vance, meant nothing here. To the other mechanics at the dusty, forgotten airfield, she was just Kay, the quiet woman who could diagnose an engine's problem by its sound, who worked 12-hour days, and who never, ever talked about her past. She tightened a manifold bolt, the click of the torque wrench a satisfying final sound. The message of her life, the one forged in the CIC of the Truman and paid for in a DC office, had finally become clear. They had tried to teach her that the world was run by rules, by procedure, by the math on a screen. The CAG, the ROE, the 30-knot minimum, they were all a system designed to prevent failure. But they were also a system designed to prevent the impossible. Her quiet fortitude had never been about obeying that system. It had been about mastering it so completely that she knew exactly when and how to break it. It was not about recognition. The Navy sailors who saw her as a menace, the colonel who saw her as a problem, the world that would never know her name, they did not matter. They were the noise. The click, click, click of a dry rifle. That was the signal. Her fortitude was the quiet, internal, unshakable knowledge that when the physics was wrong, when the mission was lost, when all hope was mathematically impossible, she had pushed the throttles. She had made the jump. She had done the job. She wiped her hands on a rag. Tucked inside her heavy steel toolbox, beneath a worn 9/16 wrench, was a small embroidered patch. Its edges were frayed from the constant, tactile reassurance of her fingers. She touched it, a silent confirmation, a quiet amen. Then, Kira Vance closed the toolbox and turned back to the engine. There was work to be done.